Unit 10 Power Functional Perspective. Contents 10.1 Introduction, 10.2 Early Writers Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. 10.3 19th Century. 10.4 20th Century Writers. 10.5 Max Weber and Talcott Parsons. 10.6 Talcott Parsons. 10.7 Polity as a subsystem. 10.8 Conclusion and 10.9 Further reading. The learning objectives. After reading this unit lesson, you should be able to grasp the meaning of power, understand the praxis of power. 10.1 Introduction. We begin by grasping the meaning of power in day-to-day use and dictionaries. Then we turn to the way three political philosophers of 17th and 18th centuries reflected upon its needs for society and the nature of power acceptable to people. A political scientist and another turned as sociologists gave their views on limits of power and sovereignty, thereby introducing the significance of other associations and groups in society. Their orientations were presented briefly. Two major sociologists, Max Weber and Talcott Parsons, contributed to the discussions on the nature of power and its legitimacy. Their scope for power holders as discussed by the former and the capacity of the social systems to realize common goals and increase its capacity as brought out by Talcott Parsons are explained. In understanding the unit, the student will find it useful to refer to units on function and others on power. To make the concepts and situations clearer, an effort has been made to illustrate a few points from the Indian setting, and such material is not based on examples drawn from the classical authors. The word power has its roots in Latin potis, posse and potere, which signifies to be also. The word has been used in several senses in daily life, like horsepower that measures energy, power loom as distinct from the hand loom, conveying the idea of mechanical energy. In mathematics, when we write x raised to power 3, that means x is multiplied by itself 3 times. If the value of the x is 2, then 2 raised to 3 is 2 raised to the power of 3, that is 2 by 2 into 2 into 2, that is equal to 8. Here power is used for making a small number larger. These examples give a general idea that power implies a capacity to increase energy and to enable a person or a thing to enlarge its scope. It is a good idea to learn how we come to such understanding. We recommend the use of a standard dictionary to get first acquaintance with a word we want to learn about. In this paragraph, two sources have been used: the Conscience Oxford Dictionary and Chambers 12th Century Dictionary. The larger volume of Oxford English Dictionary also mentioned how a word was used first and by whom. The curious student may develop this as a habit for learning various meaning and usages of a word consulting any standard dictionary. That is the beginning. Dictionary of Sociology and International Encyclopedia are further advancements. When a word is used many times, a dictionary also notes some words that convey a similar sense. The Oxford Concise Dictionary, for example, uses words like ability to do or act, influence, authority under one's control. This question has been answered in another lesson unit. Now we reach the second stage. 10.2 Early Writers Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. Discussion of a few key words are found in general literature in the writing of early scholars who expressed their view even before sociology was born. In their writing, we try to locate the meaning and significance of these words. Here, the word power and its possible links with functions are seen through the contribution of three writers, Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau. By definition, power relations relate to unequal positions and the interrelations among persons placed therein. Here a serious question is raised: why should inequality to tolerated or accepted even at the philosophical level? We have the other idea: man was born free even where he is in chains. This idea was most vigorously talked about in France when it was socially preparing for the French Revolution in 1789. The king claimed divine right, so the struggle had to be targeted on both the king and the priest who justified that right. There was a struggle for human secular forces to become stronger. Man is the measure of all things because become the new dictum. Secular knowledge was compiled in encyclopedias. Among political philosophers, Hobbes 1588 to 1679 had raised the questions about the nature of man. It appears that he talked about the primitive persons who were equal to one another. The difference between man and man is not so considerable as that one man claim himself any benefit to which another man may not pretend, as well as he, if any two men desires the same thing which they cannot both enjoy, they become enemies, endure to destroy or subdue one another. In the nature of man, we find three causes of quarrel: competition, diffidence, and glory. The first one leads to men to use violence to make themselves masters of other men's persons, wife, children, and cattle. Second, to defend them. The third, for trifles as a word, a smile, or a by reflection in their kindred friends, nations, or profession. Every man is enemy to every man. No account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and the short. Hence, the need for the laws of nature and common power to keep them in awe and answer the question need for maintaining order. His solution lay in agreed reasoning and the institution of a ruler king for the purpose. Hobbes has been considered a brilliant thinker for raising the problem of order in society. Though other thinkers disagree with the depiction of human nature and the solution, however, for our present purpose, it may be clarified that power is seen to fulfill the function of maintaining order. John Locke 1632-1704 agrees on the quality of man and confers a right on him to punish the wrongdoer. Such liberty could be misused if the victim is to be the judge also. Hence the need for the state that with common consent will perform this role and the advocacy of the civil government. Rousseau in 1712 to 1778 is the most famous of the three writers and had tremendous influence on the ideas leading to French revolutions in 1789. He is associated with the remark, man was born free, but everywhere he is in chains. From the states of nature, human beings move to develop a general will which could provide the rationale for exercise of power, and even kings and tyrants could not ignore the power of the general will. Hence the rationale for abolition of kingdoms and bringing in republics. View of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau were examined in critical details by political philosophers, but the main reason for referring to the three written are the following. The need for having central authority to maintain order was emphasized, and in this sense, state was associated with a function. Unequal distribution of power needs an explanation and justification. Here, two aspects become important: who gets power over whom, what is its legitimacy. The two questions will be dealt with in relation to the individuals and the state itself. 10.3 19th century. The 19th century discussions on society were dominated by the ideas and progress. Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer joined together ideas of society as an organism with evolution, the former giving the state a prime position in the functioning of the society. The near musical chair race was the main features of the French society, where the monarchy and the republic continued to replace one another. Ultimately, the Third Republic got stabilized in 1871. The intelligentsia had a stake in its success. An army that was as efficient as an embrace was created. Special institutions for training the civil service, technicians and leaders came into being. The church still controlled education. The education minister restricted opening of new schools. State-sponsored schools were started, yet their efficiency had to be maintained. In India, we were similar with the differences in mission schools and state-run schools. The minister consulted Durkheim, whose professional advice was that the teachers had to be trained first for the new task. The politicians offered this task to Durkheim and asked him to undertake the responsibility. Durkheim's first appointment was professor of education in provincial town in Bordeaux. Education was seen as a socializing force for a secular society. The role of the church in education and the state was reduced, and education was seen in a functional manner, strengthening the republic. Education through the church was functional for the monarchy. After the revolution, new education became functional and the republic, and dysfunctional for the church and the monarchy in France. 10.4 20th century writers. Among sociologists of the 20th century, the name of Robert M. McQuarrie in the USA is the most significant. He began as a professor of political science and wrote the book State. This was a departure from those who considered that sovereignty of the state was absolute and invisible. Austin. In this famous statement, McQuarrie said the state is not coeval and coexistence with society. He re-examined the relations among different organs of society and examined three possibilities: activities that the state alone could do, activities that the state could perform better than other associations, and activities that other organizations could perform better than state. In his view, the state was one of the great associations in society. These views were elaborated in a classical textbook he wrote in collaboration with Charles H. Page under the title Society, which has been read carefully in India for nearly half a century by students of sociology. Reflection and action. 10.1 Are state and society the same? Examine all sides of this question. In the UK, Harold Laski has had a great influence on political movements, and in his work Grammar of Politics, he propounded the view that there were plural centers of power in society, and the state was one of them. For students who read Lasky as well as McQuarrie, the plural sources of power become important in discussing the nature of interactions of the state and other associations group in society. The overall effect is that the state and polity began to be treated as dependent variables. 10.5 Max Weber and Talcott Parsons. Of the two questions mentioned earlier, those regarding the nature of power and its legitimacy, were centrally considered by the German classical sociologist Max Weber and commented upon among others by Talcott Parsons, who advanced the view that the state represented the agency for realizing the collective goals of a social system. It is to these writers that we now turn our attention. Box 10.1 Max Weber and Introduction. Max Weber, an eminent German sociologist, was born on 29th April 1864 and lived and worked up to 1920. We invite your attention to the reference to his work as given in the units for the bachelor's degree and other units for master's program of the IGNO. It may be recalled that the period was marked by economic growth and political consideration of Germany as a great power, with intense international competition and the First World War in 1914 to 18. And Weber's expert opinion was available at the time of signing of the peace treaty at Versailles in France, and later for drafting a constitution for Weimar Republic. His family background of active politicians, university professors and religious schools had given him ample first-hand experience of political process, capitalistic and bureaucratic working. As an eminent thinker, he conceptualized and analyzed these experiences, and at the world level of discussions tried to find why in Western Europe and Western Europe alone a series of events happened in the 19th century to make it a global significant event. He had compared a system of different religions to find out the way ideas had a major influence on economic growth. This little reminder reintroduced Max Weber to us. The German pronouncer of Max is like Max. The European scholar continued to refer his works in original in German. In India, we rely on the English translation, which at times disturbed the European scholars. Among sociologists in India, Airavati Karve, Ramakrishna Mukherjee, Chandrasekhar Raya, and Surendra Munshi had acquired competence in German and tried to help us imbibe the flavor of that language in the study of German sociologists, that is, sociologists choosing to write their major works in German. Max Weber, Maximal Tonis, and later Dandro. For Max Weber, the organization of social life on the basis of relational calculation and rationality as a system of thought was the most distinguishing feature of 19th century Europe. He viewed different aspects of life like economy, polity, and even music according to the way they express rationally. Thus, he distinguished profit based on plunder and illegal practices for rational capitalism. Likewise, the performance of music in orchestra with a number of instruments turning together drew his attention. His discussion on power is related to the use of legitimate power of authority. He mentioned three types of power based on three types of rationality of rules or rules. 1. Tradition. When power is acquired and passed on to the next person in traditional societies from a king to the eldest son, it becomes a case of legitimation of power through tradition. In a matrilineal society, it is the sister's son who becomes a king. Malayalam region. In the northeastern part of India, youngest daughter's husband, known as Norcom, becomes the effective manager. The king's brother succeeded the king in other territories. These differences are examples of tradition in their own society. In an American tribe, power belonged to a person who destroyed or burned the valued things, in that case called potlatch. One who burned the largest number of blankets became the chief and retained his position until someone else broke the record. The world over, in tribal setting or in chiefdoms, rules of acquiring power were based on traditions of the region concerned. These examples have been added by us, not by Max Weber, to illustrate the central idea. He used the examples of feudal lords and their relations to a king to analyze tradition as a source of legitimation of power. Bureaucracy. The word bureau literally refers to a large table with a number of drawers. Different papers dealing with a common subject can be placed in one drawer. A number of drawers help in the classification of papers. Collectively, the bureau becomes an organization dealing with the classified information. That is, we refers to the press bureau, what provide official information to the public. In government, a number of officers are so organized. They have the rules for recruitment, training, promotion, and termination of services. The person is separated from office and his powers are defined as also those of seniors and subordinates. There is the hierarchy of office and rules governing them. In their basis, they pass on papers or act or refuse to act. Merton has noted that the bureaucrat is a link between decision makers on the one hand and the person below the bureaucrat, and he acquires power because he can decide which papers may be forwarded or held back. But for Weber's point of view, bureaucracy is a rational legal system and works that way. Bureaucracy is rationalized legal system and derives its legitimacy from it. See charisma. The Persian and Urdu word charisma, the root word that traveled to European languages almost in the same sense. Charisma or the charisma indicates exactly extraordinary abilities of a person, and he is used to describe the powers of a saint as well, something like a divine element that sustains itself, performing miracles. Its continuation depends upon its capacity to deliver goods. If a person's qualities do not remain effective, maybe through age or infirmity, he or she thus loses the charisma. The legitimacy of charisma does not flow from tradition or rational bureaucracy. In fact, the charismatic figure or overrules both and introduces personal extraordinary performance as its own justification. Quite a few revolutionary personalities exercise such a power in the secular setting as well. Here Weber adds that a charismatic leader may come to power through extraordinary efforts, but his continuation in power needs legitimacy neither through a resource of tradition or rational bureaucracy. That is how we find quite a few revolutionaries becoming conservatives as assuming power. After taking the three ways of legitimations of power together, we may point out that the modern democracies specialize in constitutional ways of acquiring or getting replaced in power position, mainly through the ballot, not the bullet. In fact, the best of the democracy is the smoothness of transfer of power through elections and the constitution of political system. On this score, the placement of countries on Human Development Index is continued, and at least here India gets more favorable points than many other Asian and African countries and a few Latin American countries as well. Max Weber's formulation on power leads one to ask who has power on whom. If a commands B even against his will, A has power over B. In this case, A has positive power and B has negative power. Let us now think again. If A can exercise 4 commands over B, we may as well as say A has +4 units of power and B has -4. The sum total of power with A and B is +4 -4 is 0. This concept is called zero sum of power. 10.6 Talcott Parsons. Talcott Parsons translated a few works of Max Weber and from German into English and made important contribution to the study of power and its function for society. Here, power is seen as a necessary condition of maintaining a society, enabling it to realize a few collective goals of a society. In a modern society, functions are differentiated and interrelated. The characteristics of a system are reproduced in subsystem. Polity is one of the subsystem. How it is organized and works is stated briefly. Functional approach does not mean absence of conflicts in it. In fact, depicts the capacity of the system to deal with problems and solve them return its resources. You will thus get an idea of how in a modern society of differentiated institutions, each institution fulfills the need of the society. Each gets related to the others and derives strength from others. This is the essence of functional approach. Power is seen through this perspective mainly through the manner in which famous sociologist Talcott clarifies issues keeping American democracy on the center of attention. Some example will be given from India to make a few points clearer. Reflections and actions. 10.2 is conflict functional. Explain your position and discuss with friends. Parsons has re-examined this position on 2 counts. Firstly, zero sum can happen as a special case. Generally, however, we come across cases where the gains and losses do not cancel out. A may issue 4 commands over B, B follows them. Then on the future occasion, it may happen that B get his will carried out by A. In our daily life, we come across such situations. When a son's will has to be carried out by the father, or an officer has to agree with a subordinate clerk's opinion. In village life, relations among the patron and client also follow such a course. In a Rajasthan village, a drummer beats the drum to mark the close of a wedding ceremony. He stands firm and does not beat the drum. This is a tactic to make the patron pay the dues respectively. When the drummer is satisfied with proper payment, he sounds the last post. A carpenter by tradition supplies a wooden board to decorate a welcome sign. He keeps the entire proceeding halted until his rightful claim is accepted. Here, the public performance or delay of performance add to the power of the otherwise lowly placed artisans. Examples can be multiplied to cover many rituals in pilgrim centers and other secular situations. One of the reasons for continuation of the Jajmani relations has, among others, been the capacity of the artisan or the serving group to exercise his veto, as it were, on such chosen occasion where the rules of dominations are reversed. We are using these examples from our society to clarify that distribution of power that appears to have one direction from the high to the low can have the reverse flow as well. In such cases, power equation could be +4 units for the patron and -4 with the serving group. Yet on two other occasions the latter may wield the upper hand. Then the sum total of A's power could be +4 in favor and -2 in other cases. Maybe a zero sum cases plus -4 or -2 plus 2 is equal to 0. Yet if we add both, that would be +4 or A and +2 for B. This is described as non-zero sum power. Parsons asserts that non-zero sum is a normal feature, and if it happens that the becomes zero, that is a special case covered under the more general non-zero sum case. The second aspect of power is that it be discussed not for individual cases but for the total social system. It needs and part played by different agencies in that regard. It will be helpful here to recall the functional requirements of a system and use the paradigm thus. A stands for adaptation of the system to nature and environment. For the society as a whole, this function is performed by economy. G stands for goal attainment. This means that the collective of the society are realized. The agency charged with this function is the polity. Here the polity act on behalf of the society to realize the goals common to all. I stand for the integration. For integration, society has different units with their own interest, at times may be in conflict with each other. There is a conflict theory which suggests that conflict is also a normal phenomena in society. The functional point of view does not deny this proposition, but it asserts that the social system, if it exists, has to have a mechanism or capacity to resolve these conflicts. The term conflicts resolution precisely states that process. In a modern society, the legal system tries to perform this role. The contesting parties put forward their claims and counterclaims, and the judiciary settles the case. So long as this mode works, we say integration is maintained in the system. In the field of games and sports, there is intense competition. We have laws of the game and the referee or the umpire to give decisions that have to be accepted by both the parties. There may be a few disappointments, yet so long as the decision maker's role is duly accepted, we say that the system works or exists. L refers to latency or pattern maintenance. They define the basis for making laws in terms of or in consonance with the values of the society. There have been societies where birth or order of birth qualified a person to become the prince of or the chief. Such societies were based on the principle of ascription. Modern democratic societies insist on achievements as the basis of gaining status. In the past, religion provided the justification for the status allocation. In the new situation, secular values of the achievement are considered valuable. In case of modern democracies, Example, the permeable to the Constitution of India specific such values which are common knowledge. Yes, you guess correctly. These are liberty, equality, fraternity, etc. You can fill in the rest. The four aspects of a system are arranged in a specific order. Adaptation is related to boundary maintenance of the system, helps define the places of the system with regard to other systems and determine where it stands. Society has to define its relations with external environment, nature and its resources. Economy acts as an organized effort to make use of those resources and energies. In this sense, economy is treated as a subsystem. Analysis of economy as a subsystem was undertaken by Neil J. Smeltzer in the collaboration with Parsons. Smeltzer had studied economics in the UK, and when he joined Parsons and Harvard in USA, economy began to be linked to social systems. The two great authors thus produced the major works Economy and Society in 1956. Box 10.2 Parsons and Mills. A few years later, Parsons wrote another work under the title Structure and Process in Modern Societies in 1960. Parsons by the time had begun to write in a simpler language. A writer had been hired for him to put his ideas in simpler form. Parsons gave a lecture based on that book at the University of Berkeley, where Smeltzer had started teaching. I was present at the time. After the lecture, students talked about among themselves, "Look, I could understand what Parsons said," the other said, "but what was new in it?" I had read comments on that book given by the authors of Power Elite, C. Wright Mills, and brought that same to his notice. Parsons vigorously maintained his position and pointed out that defects indicated by the critics of American democracy were unfounded. The American judiciary was strong and could take care of cases of violation of the democratic procedure. This anecdote serves one more purpose. It emphasizes how Parsons considered the system as a going concern, that is, a system that was active and vigorous. Secondly, that it had the capacity to take care of mistakes, and finally that the people had faith in the judiciary. These views clarify how a system exists against those of critics who say that the system does not exist. Hence, any approach of studying it was itself mistakes. We may now summarize the points that makes functional analysis possible. A social system exists and it's capable of handling conflicts within. A social system consists of parts. The parts are active and through their activity contribute to the maintenance and continuation of the system. The system has a tenure and working longer than the life of the incumbents to positions and the lifespan of the generation. The method of studying parts of a system, their interrelations and contribution for the maintenance of the system is characteristic as functional approach. The basics for functional analysis was laid by Spencer, Durkheim, Malinowski and Radcliffe Brown. For more details, see earlier units in Analyzing Modern Societies. Through this approach, we recall the names of Parsons and Merton, who are referred to by some analysis as neo-functionalists. Malinowski and Radcliffe Brown had basically studied the primitive societies. Durkheim had used this approach along with two others, the evolutionary and explanatory, in terms of comparative approach. Merton had extended the ideas to modern societies and coined phrases like function and dysfunction, manifest and latent functions, and related these to the study of anomie, in which he discussed the interrelations of goals and means. Parsons was associated with the study of social system. His main point have been briefly pointed in this unit in the AGIL paradigm and functional requirements, the functional requisites of the system. This approach has been further extended to each part of like economy, polity and religion by various writers. Power as a concept belongs to the area of polity. The functional analysis of power treats it at two levels: who has power over whom, the sum is zero. This is a traditional answer. In the other hand, the functional approach to power treats it as a non-zero sum, which as a special case may also be a zero sum. That is, the zero sum is included in the more comprehensive case of non-zero sum. Power is the generalized capacity of a system to realize its collective goals. This approach goes beyond the competitive aspect of power over someone else. Functional approach treats power of the system, not merely struggle for power within a system. The power of the system can grow and enable the system both to continue and strengthen itself. In this sense, again, the power of the system is not a zero sum concept, but one that keeps on adding to its capacity to face collective challenges. 10-point sum: polity as a subsystem. Now we shall turn to the analysis of polity as subsystem of society. Such academic exercises have their own parallel in India. When we study caste in India, we also refer to the subcaste and are reminded of G.S. Gurey's famous statement, subcaste is the real caste. Later, Indian and American sociologists began using the indigenous term jadi to refer to subcaste. Our main concern here is how a system and a subsystem are analyzed at a general level. Does the subsystem behaves like a system? Parsons and Smallers agree, say yes. The economy is a subsystem, polity is a subsystem. They act that way. What does this mean? We shall see next. Higher level and generality. Diagram: political complex. ALGI. AL means regulations in political complex, and goal specification and authority, values, organizational effectiveness, primary normal leadership. Each of the four reveal internal characteristic of a subsystem. For example, authority in the second cell. Lower level and generality authority: allocation of budgetary resources, allocation of organizational responsibilities, values of control of membership contribution, general powers of making bonding. So the other three regulations, leadership and valuation, are similarly grouped in other diagrams by Parsons, reference from the 1960 book, page number 67 and 168. A subsystem reproduces the characteristic of a system and acquires its properties. We have referred to the caste of a caste. Likewise, in a family cycle, a joint family gets the shape of several nuclear families on the death of a father, as his 2 or 4 sons set up their own units. Later they beget sons who get married, and the household again becomes joined. The addition of children confirms if further. The sons of one generation become parents in the next and grandparents for the third generation. Such tendencies are seen in plenty in rural areas. In the process of growth of an economy, a company or a bank may set up a branch office, which soon acquires the status of a full unit. In the educational sphere in Punjab and neighboring states, we a university opening a new campus, which for all purpose become an autonomous unit. In the sphere of polity, we see a central government, many state governments, and a few union territories. All of them are cases of representative government with some differences in power distribution. Next step through decentralization carry forward this pattern to district panchayat samadhis and village panchayat. At all these levels, in varying degrees, exercise of power has to be functional for the units concerned, and if the system has to continue, the 4 requisites have to be attended to recall the 4 SAGIL. Each political unit has to be define its boundaries and get adapted to external situations. It has its natural and other resources to be used for the common good. 2. The common goals are attended to through the polity. Thus, there are rules of governance that spells out who gets what and how if there is a dispute or conflict. Problems like anomie, bureaucracy, relative deprivation have been examined in the context of accepted values and alternative means of satisfying them by Merton in 1968. The agency for resolving the conflict is activated. Finally, agencies act is accordance with the value patterns of the system. For example, education, health for all, as reflections of the rights of all citizens. These functions has to be performed by every subsystem of the polity. In the Indian case, the central federal government, the states, the Zilla Parishads and municipal governments, the Panchayat Samiti and the Gram Panchayat, details will be different. The scope too varied, yet the functional requirements will have to be attended to. This example clarify how a subsystem reproduces the characteristic of a system, and at each level of our understanding of the way these requirements are met proceeds along functional analysis of the system or subsystem. Parsons had analyzed political process involved in the American democracy. It needs to be emphasized that the functional approach takes note of conflicts in power. In fact, as Closer points out, there is a functional of social conflict. What does this mean? It suggests that when a conflict occurs by, say, between two political parties that are in power in different state, or the party at the state level is different from the one at the center, such differences promotes a competition among the parties to do better than others. Secondly, the conflict leads to an assertion of one's right against the other and shows how both the opposing parties are actively involved in maintaining the system from which each derives its legitimacy. The goals are enshrined in the institution, powers to define, and in its exercise the little vigilance on the part of each promoters, thus total solidarity. The generality and its strength grows through this conflict or competition. In the context of the two contending parties or two combination of parties, the situations of a conflict lead to an internal solidarity of otherwise desperate subgroups, thereby creating a functional unity among them to fight for a common cause. The definition of a common adversary leads to a process of integration within a society or group so obliged. 10.8 Conclusion. Normally, functional approach is considered also be the most suitable for undertaking the study of simpler societies. Merton brought forth a fresh paradigm of functional studies to cover problems of industrial societies at the middle level. At the macro level, the most generalized in scope as grand theory, Parsons extended the approach to the study of modern societies marked by increasing differentiation among institutions. Polity, like economy, is seen fulfilling the needs of society. Polity represents collective organization of society for attaining common goals, and the product is power. It is a non-zero sum concept. It is exercised through authorization by legitimate leadership, and it is used to minimize dissent, exercise control, and realize common goals. In a modern society like the USA, power in combination with a strong legal system and economy derives strength from the value system of the success through competition, that is achievement not by ascription, birth of or tradition. Leadership and authority physically reflects bureaucratic legal process combined with bits of charismatic effect, though the office is separated from the individual who holds it. In turn, these aspects strengthen one another and the social system persists. Problems arise but are seen in total systems perspective. 10.9 Further reading. You have books on Mark Functionalism. Functionalism by Mark Abrahamson. Or this is book name is Mark Functionalism. Okay, by Abrahamson. Then The Limits of Rationality, an essay on the social and moral thought of Max Weber by Roger. And there are few references also given.